As Europe remains gripped by the crisis on Ukraine's borders, an opening to avoid a wider conflict could be in the works. Russian President Vladimir Putin has accepted an offer from his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan to visit Turkiye in hopes of lowering tensions over Ukraine. President Erdogan made the invitation on Wednesday, saying Turkiye was ready to pave the way towards peace. Russia's troop buildup on Ukraine's border over the past few months has raised fears of an invasion. Moscow denies it has any such plans. While the US and UK have been leading the push to confront Russia, other European countries have taken a more cautious approach. The latest rupture came after Croatian President Zoran Milanovic reportedly said he would withdraw troops from NATO forces in Eastern Europe if tensions in Ukraine escalated. Confusion over the Croatian leader's comments follow Germany's own reluctance to offer a tougher stand against Russia. Germany has opposed an EU military training mission in Ukraine and also blocked NATO ally Estonia from sending military hardware to Kiev. And to discuss where this crisis could be headed, joining me now from Istanbul is Talha Kose. He is the Brussels coordinator for SETA, a policy think tank. And from Paris, Giovanna De Maio. She is a visiting fellow at George Washington University. A warm welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me on Straight Talk. Talha, on Thursday, the Kremlin announced that it would accept President Erdogan's offer to visit Turkey in a bid to lower tensions over Ukraine, although a date hasn't been set yet. But if this meeting happens soon, could it help lower the tensions over Ukraine?
Of course, this will reduce the tension. I mean, there is already a path towards reduction of the tensions. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's recent, explanations to the media about we don't want a war, we just want a diplomatic settlement, and the recent recognition and acceptance that the invitation to, Turkey, and also explanations and expectations with regard to Ukraine from the Moscow are important. So
yes,
they expected that Turkey may, as a friend of Ukraine, Turkey may put some pressure on Ukrainian authorities, and also they expected that they want a diplomatic procedure. So I think this will add additional contribution to reduction of tensions and a path towards diplomatic settlement.
Giovanna, what's your take on that? For example, would Putin be willing to sit down with Ukraine's president in a third country like Turkiye to find a solution to this crisis? And how would a setting like Turkiye affect those negotiations, seeing how Turkish President Erdogan has close ties with both leaders?
Thank you for having me. I believe that the main interlocutors here have a different take from my colleague here. I think the main interlocutor for Russia at the moment, the one that Russia seeks, is the United States. And there has been plenty of formats in which they have met, both bilaterally. The US has strongly coordinated with allies on what to bring at the table with the negotiation with Russia. I believe from watching this, since I've been watching this from the European capitals, from Paris, from Rome, from Berlin, and with my affiliation with Washington, I see that there is a fundamental agreement on the standpoint that this is not just about Ukraine. This is about Russia wanting to redraw the security map of Europe. And obviously, I believe there's going to be an opening in sitting down in different formats. It seems that on both sides, there is the willingness to pursue dialogue, which is particularly important, especially as tensions rise. But at the end, this is going to be a broader issue. It's not about just Ukraine, the fate of Ukraine.
So, Talha, what's the end game for Russia? Are these Russian demands, for example, exclusively limited to Ukraine, or go as far beyond as to cover ex-Soviet states? What is Russia aiming at now?
I think they are trying to renew the security architecture of the Europe. So the security architecture of the Europe in the post-Cold War era has been settled in 1990s, where Russia was weak at that time. So the NATO expansion and the EU EU membership, extension at that time was considered against the interest of Russia. So definitely this issue is not related to Ukraine solely. Russia wants a broader negotiation, broader diplomatic settlement, which would stop expansion of, membership of the NATO and also EU membership limits to certain countries. So Russia nowadays feels a little bit more comfortable in terms of its security and also recognizes that there is a division within the EU member countries in Europe, and also US is also overwhelmed with their own problems and polarization. So Russia considers this is the right time for themselves to renegotiate, resettle the security architecture of Europe. So recognizes the vulnerabilities of the Western side. So I think this is definitely an expectations of a broader negotiation in the security of Europe.
So, Giovanna, why can't Europe agree on how to deal with Russia?
I believe that there is one precision that we have to be precise on this. I believe that European countries do agree on the fundamentals. They do agree on the fact that Ukraine is a sovereign country that has the right to exist and has the right to make its own security and economic choices. Then, as my colleague mentioned, there are different interpretations for one of the likelihood of an invasion, and secondly on how to react to this. In general, I believe that there are different situations, at least in the countries I'm watching. You have Germany, which has a new government coalition for which this is a perfect storm, basically. They're new in government. They come from like 16 years of Merkel, who has been dealing with foreign policy mostly centered in the chancellorship and not really in the foreign ministry. Then you have Italy completely focused on the elections for the president of the republic. And then again, France that is facing elections very soon, with important economic ties between these countries and more largely Europe, with Russia, and as we're facing the winter months, with the energy and the gas. The worry is about gas supply. So there is a multi-faced multi-faced picture. But I believe that overall, member states agree on how they see this conflict playing and what the right of Ukraine to exist.
You say at least they agree on principle, and the U.S. Talha says that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline will directly supply Russian gas to Germany, will not open if Russia invades Ukraine. And Germany's foreign minister also hinted that a possible invasion will affect this pipeline project. So is this a hint that Germany is finally coming onto the U.S. side and of a more direct approach against Russia?
I believe that Germany fundamentally is on U.S. side, has always been. The question is how the domestic dynamics impact the foreign policy choices. In this regard, Nord Stream 2, there are many analysts, many politicians, the Greens in particular, that have been against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from the very beginning. So this is definitely a tool that Germany has to leverage against Russia. But I think in this particular moment, the West, since, as we mentioned earlier, it's not just about Ukraine, it's about European security architecture. I think Germany needs to make a shift in terms of security perspective, not just economic sanction, and how Germany's role in Europe will be.
So, Talha, what's your take on that? Is Germany shifting towards the U.S. now more? I mean, can it risk harming relations with the U.S.?
I agree that, I mean, Germany is always in the side of US, but they also have complicated trade relations with Russia. And also they don't want further tension. So they would be happy that Russia gets an agreement with some satisfaction. So they know that if Russia is satisfied in certain terms of security and certain economic terms, they will be a better partner for the European security. Whereas some other countries, including UK, Poland, and the Baltic countries, believe that only balancing Russia would produce sustainable security in that region. So, I mean, both of those groups of countries are in line with US, but their perspective of security and sustainable diplomatic relations with Russia are different.
So, Giovanna, how has the U.S. disengagement from regional affairs during the Trump era weakened NATO's influence and caused divisions among the member states? Is Trump's legacy partly to blame here?
Interesting question. I believe during his mandate, Trump was very critical about NATO, very harsh, very confrontational with European allies about their actual contribution to the NATO alliance. And he even got to question the importance of NATO in the activation of Article 5. But in concrete terms, the US has not disengaged from the eastern flank of NATO. There actually were more troops were displaced, were moved on this flank, and in practical terms, the U.S. has. If you ask European member states on the eastern side, you would hear that the U.S. has not disengaged from the area. This disengagement has mostly happened in the Middle East and in North Africa regions, where European allies will probably need to step up their defense game.
So, Talha, if NATO comes out looking weaker after this crisis, could this division push the European Union to build its own autonomous EU force?
I think the autonomy debate went on when Trump was, of course, it's going on for maybe more than 10 years, but when Trump was disengaged from the security of Europe, this debate became more relevant. But nowadays, with the current crisis, I think the solidarity in NATO is getting stronger. And it is clear that European countries do not have their consolidated capacity to counter Russia. I think with this crisis, I don't know how it will be settled, but this will, I think, strengthen NATO and United States presence in EU security. Will be strengthened.
We'll see about that. Unfortunately, Giovanna, Talha, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.